Good evening. My name is Chris Martin. I'm with the Illinois Podiatric Medical Association, and this month's Feet Forward is going to be talking about kids. Last month, we were fortunate enough to have Dr. Misty McNeil, who is a podiatrist out in Elmhurst, and she treats a lot of kids. This month, we're going to take a little different approach, and we're going to talk about back-to-school issues. And we're fortunate enough to have the president of the Illinois Podiatric Medical Association, Dr. Ted Politzis. Welcome to Feet Forward.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Great.
And we'll see what we can do to help out here today.
Great. Just to give you a little primer on the show, we do get some call-ins occasionally. We're going to go through some information about that'll help parents as they shop for shoes or treat new injuries from maybe school athletics, and a lot of things that you see in your practice and from your colleagues' practice. So
Sure.
Feel free to chime in with any information advice you have. And of course, as the calls come in, we'll be able to take those too. Right?
Very good.
Now, one of the things we talked about last month was a very unusual survey that the American Podiatric Medical Association did, which found that a lot of parents don't seek out podiatric medical care for their kids. They'll go themselves if they'll have a corn or a bunion or something. They'll go to someone like you or their neighborhood podiatrist or someone they have a relationship with. But for some reason, when their kids complain about feet,
Sure.
they don't take their kid to a podiatrist. So I want to get your feedback on that and perhaps talk about some ways that we can kind of overcome that. And then I also want to talk about different kinds of injuries that you see in kids and the ways we can prevent those and things for parents to look out for.
Of course. Well, first of all, it's very important that the public realizes what podiatry does for the country. It keeps all of America on their feet, not just the elderly. It helps with diabetics, of course, but again, we also do full spectrum care of also pediatric patients. There are podiatrists that do nothing but specialize in pediatric care and surgery. So we are capable of evaluating this and seeing this in patients as well.
And podiatry is set up a little bit differently than medical care in that pediatricians are, like you said, there are some podiatrists that specialize in pediatrics or kids. But not as many proportionally as pediatrics as a medical specialty.
No, unfortunately, there aren't as many problems in children as there are in the elderly, and this is probably why more podiatrists are focusing in that direction. But again, all of us are trained in developmental abnormalities and deformities in the foot that can begin as early as infancy, and actually some of them begin in the womb.
That's right. That's a very interesting point. Now, Labor Day is coming up, and of course, after Labor Day in the city of Chicago, school-age kids return to school. I know I'm very happy that my kids are finally going back to school. It's a big relief. But for a lot of parents, they're shopping for new clothes, school supplies, and of course, shoes. Shoes are a big part of sort of a back-to-school shopping regimen. So what are some things that parents should look for when they go shopping for new kids for? And we can take it by age, because there's different needs for different ages. But
Well, when you're talking about school-age children, you're also looking at what do they need the shoes for. Of course, they need to be rugged, and basically in children, shoes are pretty much mostly designed just to protect the feet. You're really not looking at anything horrible as far as shoes, but what you're looking at is a shoe that's going to be very stable, a shoe that has good flexibility up in the metatarsal area, which is right underneath the ball of your foot, because that's where most of the bending goes. If a patient or a child doesn't have a lot of medical problems, or there's no major medical problem with their foot, usually most of those type of shoes that are out there, brand name shoes, are actually fairly good. It's very important that they're fit properly, and that's a big problem because a lot of the times the parents go into the shoe store and they say, well, my child's a size 6, they're not really sized. So every time you take your children in for shoes, of course, make sure that you have the width and you have the length as well. And make sure that you find a place, especially if your child, like my son, for example, has a very, very wide foot, and make sure that you're fit properly in width and the child isn't into a shoe that's too narrow that's going to cause medical problems later on.
a lot of times, I know this is true with my kids, you'll put them in something, they won't say anything about it. They won't complain until later on. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to get feedback right away. Now, one of the things I've always been curious about is when that salesperson puts that thumb down on the toe, what is that for and why is that important?
Well,
or is it important?
As I said, what you're looking for in the shoe is you want to make sure that it's sized appropriately in length. Most adult feet, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, swell by about 4% by volume. So but this hasn't been really worked out for in pediatrics so far as to how much bigger the foot gets after they've been standing for a long period of time. So really you want to have good toe room in the front. So when they do put a little thumb's length in front of it, you would just want to make sure that the toes aren't brushing up towards the front of the shoe, causing irritation, calluses, corns, that type of thing, or any abrasions that could cause problems in the future. But again, you really want to look at the shoe, make sure it's got good flexibility, but not too much flexibility, and that it has good counter support in the back by the heel, so that it really doesn't break down that easily for the child.
And so would you recommend that parents take their kids shoe shopping at the end of the day?
Usually it helps towards the midday, just because at that time they're not too swollen and they're also not just up and out of bed at that time. But usually kids, you really don't have a problem anytime that you take them for shoes. But just make sure, again, that they're sized not only for length, and they're also sized for width as well.
Great, that's helpful information. And by the way, for your viewers out there, you can go to the Illinois Podiatric Medical Association's website, which is up on the screen here, www.ipma.net, for a podiatrist in your neighborhood. You can just punch in your zip code. All the IPMA members in that zip code will come up. It's a very handy little feature of the website. So we certainly encourage all the viewers to go there. Now I want to talk about pediatric injuries specifically. Let's go through a couple of the more common ones that you see and your colleagues see a lot of in pediatric podiatric offices nowadays. And what are the things parents can look for to determine whether they should take their child to a pediatrician versus a podiatrist?
Well, again, most of the problems that children have, everybody thinks that they're going to outgrow them. The problem is in those children that they don't outgrow the problem. And that's where really a podiatrist really fits the bill and basically can actually diagnose if there is going to be any developmental problems. But going back to your question about injuries in school, the biggest problem that I'm seeing in my patients, and I just was talking to a mother about this yesterday, is a child who had heel pain. And I asked the mother, how old was the child? She said about 12. The child basically was having a lot of pain right where the growth area is back by the heel bone. And I asked, are you active in sports? The child was very active in sports. And the problem is in that age group between 11 and 15, these children go through that growth spurt where the bones are growing much faster than the tendons are. And what happens is it's almost like a bow and an arrow where the string stays about the same length, but yet the bones are growing at a phenomenal rate. When that happens, these children have very tight strings where these tendons are actually pulling on the bones where they're attached. And in the back of the heel, towards the back, right over there, towards the back of the heel, there's a growth center over there. And you've got your Achilles tendon inserting into it from one side, and you've got the plantar fascia, this ligament on the bottom, and it's basically causing tremendous stress right on that growth center. And what's amazing to me, and again, I have two children of my own, is one is in dance and one was baseball, and now he's in swimming, is the coaches of most of these teams, they really don't stretch the kids out appropriately, especially at that age group when they're going to have those tremendous growth spurts. And it's just very, very important that they're doing good stretching both before they start their program, maybe even in between if they've got a long practice,